What's your best "this is a bad idea, let's do it anyway" moment? When I was in high school and had my own job to buy things with, I decided I would buy a 4L pail of ice cream, a 2L bottle of A&W root beer and make a giant root beer float. I then proceeded to eat/drink the entire thing over the course of a hockey game. I did not throw up, but I definitely did not feel like eating supper that night. I know how this sounds. But I never said I was smart. As a teenager I dislocated my shoulder and tore some muscle while doing a flip on a slip and slide. I never went to the doctor for it because I'm poor. But I still went backpacking the next day, and my friend's dad brought in some zipline equipment on his horses. And since I couldn't miss out on the fun, I figured that it was the muscles that lift my arm that were torn and that the ones I used to hold myself up were fine. So I rode that zipline with a dislocated shoulder and dropped into a lake where, if I had not been able to swim well for some reason, I could have drowned. Anyways, years later and I have now been trained on how to relocate joints. It turns out that the zipline is probably what put my shoulder back into place. So it worked out, but it was still a bad idea. Anyways, that shoulder still hurts regularly. I sure wish I wasn't as dumb as I was all the time. Driving a car on a beach when I'd never done it before. Immediately got stuck right at the bottom of the ramp going to the beach. Luckily there was a nice guy with a Jeep that went and bought a tow rope and pulled me out. Right after he pulled me out, another person did the same thing and got stuck in the same spot, so he pulled them out too. I had a similar experience years ago. First time driving on a beach, got stuck, got pulled out by a kind passerby. Then a cop pulls up and writes me a citation for being on the beach in a car that could get stuck. Turns out only SUV-style vehicles with 4-wheel drive were allowed. What really frustrated me, and still rankles to this day, was that I had to pay to go on the beach in the first place, and the person at the gate who took my money obviously knew that my car wasn't an allowable one, but took my money and waved me through anyway. Still my fault for not checking the rules, but really aggravating that they wouldn't have warned me off. Bought an abandoned mansion out of foreclosure that used to be a hoarder house. 4 years into a 2-year renovation plan and we're not quite half done. Gotta say though, if you need to spend a year at home, this is the house to do it in. Plenty of space for every task and still have room to run laps. In high school my brother was having a birthday party at our house and we had a pool. We took an air compressor and duct taped a hose on it and used it to breathe underwater. Then we started tying people to pool chairs and throwing them in the deep end with the hose to breathe with, see how long it would take to escape. We progressively made more and more difficult restraints. Several times the hose would come out of someone's mouth and we'd have to dive in and raise the person's head above water. How no one drowned that day I have no idea. Wasn't me but my second older brother, he was 7 I think at the time, was trying to light a bush in our backyard on fire while my oldest brother, 10 years old, stood next to him and watched while saying, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The best part was when my dad caught them and asked what my brother was doing. He looked at my dad and said with a straight face, "I'm trying to talk to God through the burning bush." My dad laughed so hard that he didn't get into trouble. In high school I had a science project that we had all year to complete. I kept finding reasons to put it off until I realized I had only a week to complete my project. Realizing I wouldn't get it done, I decided to fake it. I was one of the first called to present my project. I presented my faked project on the whiteboard by drawing pictures of what I had intended to do and making up numbers for how long a mouse could live without oxygen in a 5-gallon bottle compared to how long they could live with a plant sealed in with them. One of my classmates asked if I really killed mice and what I did with them. I said that I had and just fed them to my cats. In the end I ended up with a B for standing in front of the class and spouting a bunch of BS. Got married after 2.5 months of knowing my now husband. Still married to him. 11 years and counting. When I was in middle school I was staying the night at my buddy's house. We were bored and decided that we would fold his tube of toothpaste in half and wedge it in his bathroom door and then slam the door. When we opened it up there was toothpaste everywhere, like on the ceiling and shit. We did a half-assed cleanup job and carried on. The next day, his maid, who we liked because she was funny and we knew her pretty well, was crying and talking to his mom. Do they not like me? Have I done something wrong? She thought we deliberately shot toothpaste on the ceiling to make her job harder for her. Needless to say we felt pretty bad. Did you apologize or explain that you were just messing around? Yeah, his mom made us go say sorry and tell her that we didn't even consider the fact that she would be cleaning his bathroom up after that. Maritza, you were really dope. You know what salvia is? Hanging out drinking with a buddy from high school and he asked if I wanted to try this 20 times salvia extract he had. I'd never taken any sort of hallucinogen, but figured if it's legal and sold at the local record store how crazy could it possibly get? That's actually a terrible way to judge it in retrospect. Like holy shit. To this day it's by far the most insane thing I've ever experienced. Like exponentially more bizarre and intense than the craziest dreams I've ever had in my life. I'm glad I was a little drunk when I did it or it would have been terrifying. Lost all concept of myself or what a human being or earth or even time were. Got transported to this gigantic, seemingly endless chamber of sorts that looked like the heat farms in the Matrix but golden colored and shimmering. The whole place had a vaguely sinister feel to it. I was some sort of insect-like creature flying around with others in this place experiencing a sort of hive mind in my head. There exists no possible combination of words that could even come close to accurately describing how bizarre this felt. Describing the thoughts in my head at that moment would be like describing the color blue to a person born blind. It's impossible to even come close to conceptualizing it without direct experience. Just the fact that it's possible for the human mind to enter such a state sends a chill down my spine like 20 years later. Anywho, eventually I started to come back to our reality. You know that feeling you get when you take a really hard nap and when you wake up you almost feel like you've forgotten who you are for a moment? This felt like that but times 1,000. It was like I was being born again. Never been so grateful for our ordinary mundane reality in my entire life. Craziest thing was the whole experience only lasted 5 or 10 minutes back on Earth. I don't regret doing it, but you couldn't pay me to try it again. I've since read up on it and apparently 20 times is excessively strong and not popular with enthusiasts because it often produces experiences that are too intense. If you read all that and are still thinking, this sounds like something I would like to do, I would strongly recommend a weaker type and not to take the absolute biggest freaking rip of it you can your first attempt. I am convinced the only reason salvia is legal is because it convinces people not to do drugs. That shit can be intense. Riding a skateboard down a steep hill that ended with a 90-degree turn and a rocky river if I failed to make the turn. About halfway down I hit a half-frozen patch of ice and was almost keeping pace with the cars passing over the bridge. With no idea what to do and my idiot friends watching, I let out a big wee. Before tumbling for a while followed by a good slide on my forearms. Took about a year for the big gouges near my elbows to actually heal. Not me but my dad. They rented a house next to a lake for a day where they got really drunk. They wanted to play football in the middle of the night. They found a little soccer ball and some tiny goals made of plastic. They set it up, drank more and tried to play. Well, my dad's buddy stand in front of the goal, tried to kick the ball, missed, collapsed on the ball and the goal. They heard a huge breaking sound and a popping sound. Everyone was yelling, "He's dead." When they learned that the guy was alive but sleeping on a deflated ball and some plastic shards, they tried to move him, but my dad's hand slipped and he fell into the lake, where he proceeded to pass out. Fortunately he is alive and well, because the others were sober enough to notice him in the water, but you can imagine our surprise when we went to collect him the next day and everyone was passed out wet on the grass next to empty beer bottles and some remains of a soccer ball. Please like, comment, and subscribe.